I'm just wanting to do a little video on some of the homeless people in Melbourne.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Well, not really, because I think people assume that just because you're homeless that you don't have need to have some sort of dignity.
Yeah, right.
And it's sort of like everyone will ask you questions, and sometimes you may be prepared to tell your story, but if it's a traumatised story, it then reiterates what's happened to you. So I guess if you're in a house, no one's going to rock up at your house and say, can you tell me why you're here, or is that okay if I talk to you? Sort of, I don't know, it's a dignity element.
Well, what's your name?
My name is Suze.
How old are you, Suze?
I'm 62.
62. And let's discuss this dignity aspect, because it's very important. People do tend to walk past homeless people as though they're not there. And often when homeless people ask for money or food, people ignore them.
And so I don't really ask, and the thing is that you've got different elements to homelessness now, because you have so many. You think about the whole state, the things that are happening in Australia. You have floods and fires, and you have domestic violence. I think there's a huge assumption that everyone that's on the street is either mentally ill or has a real drug issue, and they're not to be dismissed because they're serious things. And often, you have a lot of traumatised people who blanket things with substances. So I think it's a lot more complex than the average person may sort of assume. And of course you do have certain things, certain elements, certain parts of those things that are, part of it. But it's so complex now. You have a lot of older women who are homeless, or you have people who've been isolated by the COVID situation and have been separated from friends and colleagues and, people that they've associated with, and there's isolation and sort of, just being cut off from each other. So I just think I like how the Romans operated. The Romans operated by, they accepted people at a lower economic level. They accepted people that lived on the street. They had little holes in the wall for them to sleep in, and that's how the communal baths sort of happened. And I think when you have a capitalist society, it's sort of like, you must do better, you must do well, etc., etc. But there will always be a fallout, and often that fallout is not just from domestic violence or drug addiction. It can be from systemic abuse as well. So it's very, very complex. And so if you spoke to someone about their individual story, they may not be willing to tell you.
Suze, you're very, very articulate. Can you tell me a little bit about your story, about what you were? Were you a teacher or a...
No, because it's not really a story. I always think of it as an account. A story sort of gives you an element of fiction sort of base, and
okay.
it isn't fictitious, and it's very complex. So I wouldn't discuss it with a complete stranger. Of course I wouldn't, because it would take a long, long time, and if it takes a therapist 6 months to sort of discuss things with you, you're not going to be able to do it in 5 minutes. That's all it is.
That's fair.
And I have, and you can't. And people have very, very deep roots to it. And then sometimes people could just be, listen, they're one paycheck away from homelessness. So and so maybe the bottom denominator for homelessness is really poverty. Maybe you could manage things like drug addiction or trauma and escape to another country if you had the money.
Okay.
So it could be that. It could the bottom line may be that. But anyway, I'm not the equation worker. I can't work it out.
Can you tell me anything a little bit about your background, about your education, about anything that you've done?
No, because that's not relevant to homelessness.
Okay, really?
I don't believe it is. No, I don't. I don't believe it is. No. Because if I've had 13 years of homelessness, with very marginal breaks in between, and very poor housing, and the discrimination against people who pay a lot of money to be littered with asbestos and all sorts of things. It's horrendous what happens to people who have absolutely nothing to back them up, and so it's not relevant. I could be university educated, I could be from a military background, I could be a battered wife, I could be a drug addict, I could be a person who's escaping, I could be a criminal, I could be someone trying to on the run. It wouldn't really be relevant, actually, to a degree, to a large degree.
Yeah. How do people passing by tend to treat you?
Actually, well, some people treat you with respect. Some people they may be. I don't really need them to notice me. In fact, I think that it depends, and I think it depends on the individual person and their perspective and what they understand, and really you're not here to take up their day. I think there are times when there may be things on the street that homeless people might do that can scare people, elderly people, children and things like that, because of they can be a little bit out of control. And so you've got to see both sides of the fence, and if you can't do that, then you probably don't have respect for people who aren't homeless. So there's two sides to it, really, probably more, but there's if people ignore you, then that's their prerogative. They can do that. That's up to them. And you don't really want their attention either. It's sort of it can be a debilitating situation until you recognise that you can have any background you like. You're still going to be the same person. You can be in a king's palace. You can be in suburbia. You can be at home with a family. You could be a person who has a job. It doesn't really matter your background, you're still the same person. And so being homeless can be an advantage in a sense, in that you can see life from a different perspective, and you can have a lot more compassion for people that you may not have had 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
So you don't solicit people for food or money?
No, never.
But you obviously accept what people can give you.
Sometimes I don't.
Is that true?
No, I don't. Because if someone's extremely drunk or not in control of themselves, why would you accept something from them? Because they might not really want to give that to you. It might just be a spur of the moment thing. So it's not. That's just my personal choice.
Okay.
So not trying to take advantage of people. Sometimes people will give me things, and actually, a lady gave me a donation recently because I wanted to do some street drawing art, and she gave me some money so I can, and I just went up today to the council to see if I can get a buskers permit so that I might be able to do some drawing. So you have a different, do you see what I'm saying? So you at least can try and be productive. I've got a broken hand, it's going to be very, very painful, but at the same time I can see that nobody wants to be completely useless. Nobody wants to be debilitated to the degree that they can't contribute, or that they can't feel better about themselves, or that they can't be productive. That's what I really believe. Some people are very, very trapped in addiction, and they're going to need some extensive help. And what I really wish in all the years of being homeless and not being someone who has that problem is seeing that really there are very few, appear to me anyway, to be very few detox or rehabilitation places for people who are addicts, and I would really like to see more people look at the patterns where people are successful, so that they can introduce them to Melbourne. And there's not enough women's shelters. There really are not enough for women, and you'll see a lot more older people, so there's not enough there. But money's got to come from somewhere, and so it's a very difficult situation.
So are you sleeping here tonight?
I probably won't sleep here tonight.
Okay.
No,
where do you normally sleep, or where will you sleep tonight?
Well, it'll depend on where I decide to sleep tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, because it'll depend on the atmosphere. If I wanted to stay here, I would stay here. And sometimes, because over the years I've met some people, younger people, it's debilitating to recognise that when you're not there, they can die of an overdose. if they have somewhere to come, they can just be with you, and then if they're OD or something, you can call an ambulance so you can try and help them. The other aspect is that at the moment there are a lot of people who seem to be more suicidal after COVID, and as a consequence of that can become, you know, sort of a bit psychotic, and then seem to be a bit more homicidal. So it's very difficult as someone who's I'm not trained. So it would be good to be able to have some sort of access to people that have proper understanding. Not people who are just assuming that someone has two categories, but people who will actually take on the shattered and the broken and look at deeper aspects for them. Yeah, it'd be good.
Suze, you seem to take pride in your appearance. I
don't have pride in my appearance.
Well, it looks as though you do. You don't look, you know, I guess you don't look like one would expect a homeless woman to look like. You have your hair done.
What does a homeless woman look like?
Well, you know, it's the cliche, you know, jagged hair, unwashed, unkempt.
Why?
Dirt. You have quite a...
Why? I don't actually...
Okay.
I don't see that. There are, over the years, seriously, there are people who don't necessarily come in that classic little terminology. That's the biggest problem. That is the biggest problem, is that people make these assumptions. Yeah. They make assumptions. They seriously do. In fact, they did some, what was that show? And they did a show, and they said, it's too tidy, you need to be homeless. Was that, remember? They did, I don't know what, was it on ABC? They came in interview, they said, you look... Yeah, and then you get people go...
Say again, you were approached by a TV program.
Too tidy to be homeless. And they
said that to you?
They did a whole there was a program on television. It was a program on TV. It was a program on TV.
Is that?
Yeah. Okay. You can't. Nobody fits the bill anymore. You can't make that assumption. That's just the worst thing to do. That is discriminatory, and it's the worst thing to ever do. To assume that somebody is this, that, and the other, and so, I don't have a drug issue. But I mean, I have,
It's a microphone and a camera.
I could have many issues that aren't. It's sort of like, so if you go and have a shower every 3 days, you don't look like a homeless person. It's sort of like, and even if I wasn't a homeless person, it means that a lot of people come out here who are not homeless because
they don't fit the bill.
No, but they may have an agenda to get money for certain things, or that they may come out as a person who has associated with a lot of people on the street and wants to keep associating with people on the street, or they can come out as Christian ministry. There's been Christian ministry, and people who live with homeless people on the street for Christian ministry. So you take your pick. Which one am I?
I couldn't.
How would you know what I am? You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I tell you, when you've lost everything, when you've had everything stolen from you, when you've been bashed, raped, violated, and persecuted, you're systemic abuse, you've got domestic abuse, you've got all of that, I'll tell you what, I'm accredited. I am absolutely accredited to stay on the street for the rest of my life, because I tell you what, I would rather be here, because people on the street, people who are heroin addicts, people who may not have the most intellectual capacity in the world, have been more kind to me than my family have ever been, and more kind to me and more honest to me than the system has ever been. I'm telling you this, when the system fails, that's when you'll see people out on the street. So don't blame the people on the street, look at the system. Because even if they give you housing, my friend, let me tell you this, the last place I was at had raw storage, rusty broken pipes that flooded the place. They didn't replace the carpet for 6 months. Asbestos exposure, but 3 times I was exposed to asbestos and I left asbestos. Even though I complained the last time, they just left it there. So I'm telling you this, when they find you housing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's housing, it could be a death trap. They put you there, you pay rent to inhale asbestos. And that's a fact. Let me tell you that.
Do you ever stay at these hostels?
No.
No?
When I first came to the street, I had no ID. And, I mean, I just got used to being in a particular place, and it became a safer place to be in one area. Blessing, see you tomorrow maybe, Terry? So it's a complex issue. There's so many tragic stories where people have been taken to mental health situations and wrongly diagnosed, and there's some terrible human rights abuses that happen. And so people are traumatised anyway when they get here. Then people start categorising and threatening them, carting them off. So you'll find a lot of damage actually. A tremendous amount of damage. But there are some incredible people, incredible organisations, incredible people who really are trying to do their best. But you'll find a reticence because there's been so much damage done. So there's a degree, I mean, people might call it paranoia, but it really isn't. It's learned response. It's a learned response, and it's a learned fear element. Because nobody wants to go through shocking experiences when they've already been through them, or nobody wants to go through shocking experiences when they're really trying to blanket the shocking experiences they had as children. So it's sort of, it's a very individualistic thing. There are workers who are trying to do their best, there are doctors who are trying to do their best, there are community nurses that are just lovely, but there are also an element of sort of sadistic, control freak, superiority queens, and you'll meet them along the way if you're unlucky, and hopefully they're in the minority. Right. But it's an extremely tough thing to manage. And if you have been homeless for a long time, and these are your friends, and these are the people that have been kind to you, and your family has dished you off, for whatever reason that might be, of course you're going to find people who are even housed who are going to come back. They're going to come back because that's their community. They build up a community. They build up a community going. And the stress and the absolutely wears you out, dragging everything with you. How do you go for jogging with you when you have to take all your crap with you? I mean that might be minority with most homeless people that sort of want to get a job. But we've known people who've been addicts who've worked, haven't we? They've been working. Yeah, working and so I mean there's a lot of corporate addicts as well. It doesn't just mean people on the street are the only addicts on the planet.
Winter's coming. And we've had some very bad nights recently. How do you stay warm when it's really awful, cold, rainy weather? What do you do?
Well, you have a great group called 300 Blankets. 300 Blankets they are. They're absolute blessings to the people on the street.
What is 300 Blankets?
300 Blankets is a charity group.
Okay, if I look them up.
And they've been around for a lot of years, and they bring blankets and a lot of things like socks and whatnot, and the little things that you can, heat yourself up with. And there's a lot of charity people. There's a lot of people who do stuff off their own backs to help homeless people. Really
now, Suze, can you just quickly tell me again about your eyesight? You said that you're legally blind and without your glasses.
Without my lenses, yeah, I am.
That makes you very careful about where you stay.
Well, you have to trust. I'm a Christian, so I trust a higher power to keep me sort of safe. And plus, I don't follow, people about, and I haven't for a lot of years. You just learn to keep yourself. And you learn not to live an ordinary life, so I don't frequent pubs or you basically just stay in your arena, in your spot. And as the years have progressed, I've had like temporary housing, which has been, well, some of it's been okay. Some of the workers are really fantastic, but the actual properties, why would you want to expose yourself to asbestos 3 times? It's and I have photos of what it is to my skin. In essence, you may be safer on the street. And so even for people involved with domestic violence and women and whatnot, you're almost safer on the street than you are with someone who's going to bash and rape you and break your bones and leave you needing surgery. Let's be honest. Because if you handle these things properly, as carefully as you can, without leaving yourself vulnerable with substances and whatnot, then I suppose that's how I've survived for so many years. But I can't say that for everyone, and I think that some people are so vulnerable. But at the same time, so maybe an ordinary citizen walking by a homeless person who's off their face on ice, they're vulnerable too. So I don't know who is responsible for finding a balance and how to help that picture be more illuminated. If I could do that in a small way, then I'd be willing to do it. And I don't know that I'd be much help, really, but this is not just about having compassion for people. People have the right to, if you like, walk down the street and feel safe and be safe. So you have people that escalate, and I think that does become threatening. Just because I might be used to that and you learn techniques of how to handle it, doesn't mean that a person with their children walking by, an older person, isn't going to feel vulnerable. So there's a lot for the council to have to manage. Definitely, without question, a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And so, your interest in these things are maybe personal, but it also may be situational, or it may be to do with how the city might function better. Yeah, and we all hope for better ends and solutions. Got to work towards solutions, I guess.